Pensado's Place is brought to you by
We've got a pioneer guest from a pioneer location. You're going to enjoy this one. Brand new ITLs. You're at the place. It's Pensado's Place.
Hey everybody, got a lot to get. We got a lot to bring to you today. It's going to be a special show. Herbert,
What does that mean exactly?
you know what, I didn't get a full yay, so let me just yay.
Okay, we'll get that worked in.
Yeah, I was trying to get a Marin County yay in, but it got a little high pitched. So
I got you. I got you.
Good
So was your woo. Your woo's a little high pitched too, just so you know. Because
We're skating thin ice here, Herb.
Absolutely. Well, because we have such a special show, should we get to it?
Absolutely.
So, guys,
Special is the operative word. Very
absolutely.
special.
Welcome. Good to see you. We're coming to you from the Art Institute of California, Los Angeles.
Yay.
Always good to be here in our beautiful HD studio, which Dave will say stands for.
The Penwick Media Complex.
Okay, that's a new one. We'll have to explain that one later. Only you and I will know that one. Always good to see you. Our social media stuff, we have, as we said last week, we are going to be talking to you much more often and liking and subscribing. So make sure you comment. That stuff helps our show survive, allows us to bring more stuff to you. You'll see it right below us. So like, subscribe, and comment. Always good stuff for us.
Absolutely.
Say hello to our buddies at Vintage King. Hey, Vintage King, how are you?
What's up? What's up?
We love them as usual.
Yeah.
Coming closer, we're about a couple of weeks away from this special thing we're doing with Avid, correct?
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It's more than
I'm a
exciting.
little nervous about it, actually.
Well, it's like there's things we don't know. Like you're a control freak. Everybody knows that. I can say that without embarrassing you. And you like to plan things. And this thing's going to be hectic. It's going to be surprises, people dropping by.
Yeah. So here's what we're talking about. NAMM is coming up January 25th through 27th. Our buddies at Avid and our wonderful partners have asked us to come down, bring the show down, bring the set down, and shoot live from there for 3 straight days. We're going to be down there at their booth, which I think is booth number 6400.
It's more like an area than a booth.
Yeah, it's a stage, it's the whole thing. We're at booth 6400, I think in Hall A. We're going to shoot 3 shows, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 2 o'clock each day. Thursday show will be an interview with Greg Wells and something special he's doing with Avid we're going to talk about and let you guys know.
Really special.
Very special. Friday, we're going to have Michael Fitzpatrick from Fitz and the Tantrums.
I can't wait.
That's going to be very cool. He's very cool, like a true front man. Like he's a real deal. And then he's going to be performing at their party, which is from 6 to 8 Friday night. So you want to do that. We're going to have fun there. And then Saturday, thanks to you guys, we're going to celebrate our 100th episode. 100 episodes. Can you believe that?
Well, one a year, I feel 100, so some days.
So you're invited to the party. If you're going to be at NAMM, come through. You're invited to all 3 tapings, actually. We're just going to make that Saturday a party. We've got some prizes for you. Avid's going to give some prizes. Pensado's Place is going to give some prizes. Special guests are going to come through. You might have a chance to grab a mic, and if the show is important to you, you can let us know. And Dave and I want to tell you how important you are to us. We have opportunities to take pictures.
We're going to make every effort. We're going to make every effort to make ourselves as available as time allows and as things permit, so that you guys can learn from us just how special you are from us, and then compliments will be gladly accepted as always. Really looking forward to seeing you guys there. This is going to be a special thing. Thanks to you. This is your night.
Absolutely.
Not just ours.
Avid's going to kind of do a cool thing with T-shirts on that Saturday, and make sure you get down, get your T-shirt early. We're going to take some pictures, allow you to tag it, and then after at NAMM, we're going to get some prizes going for people who send in a picture of them in their T-shirt and their most unique pose or funny stuff and so forth. And we're going to give some prizes for that stuff too. More on that later. So let's make sure we have fun with our guys. We're going to see them there. We want you there. And
I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
It's going to be a ball. Why don't you introduce Into the Lair?
This week's Into the Lair, the thing to take away from this, apart from what I'm showing you, is that think backwards sometimes, deconstruct the problem and it'll lead you to a solution. So a lot of times I'm thinking that I'm losing something when I compress, so why not add it before I compress? And I'm proud of this. I think you guys are going to like it. I'm ready when you are, Will. There's been a lot of discussion about the loudness wars. As you guys know, I'm not really comfortable with the term loudness wars because 0-0 is just packing more below zero than ever before, which gives the perception of it being louder, but it's technically not louder. In the digital world, if you cross zero, a lot of bad things can happen now. A lot of the great mastering guys can cross zero. I have trouble doing it. But what I wanted to show you today was we're making music for people to consume, and if we take our job responsibly, we want to give them as good a quality and as great a work as we can give them, but something that they would enjoy. That's the whole concept, is to give our audience music they enjoy, but to do it within the cost restrictions, the time restrictions, and the skill restrictions that we all have. So with that philosophy, sometimes I feel like I'm losing a little bit of transients when I dump a bunch of stuff into a limiter. So I started trying to figure out how to cure that. A lot of limiters don't give you control over the attack, but even if they did, I'm not sure you need it with this technique. So what I experimented with over the last year was, and I'm not the first, by the way, there's several people across the internet that have done this, and if I'm stepping on your toes, I apologize, but I'm clearly not the first. Russ over at ProToolsExpert.com with hyphens in between each word, he's got some incredible tutorials. Although I can't remember if I saw this on his site or not, but if I did, it was subconscious because I think I was doing this a long time ago. The minute that Transx by Waves came out, I was using it that way. So let me show you some examples of taking and enhancing the transients before the limiter, and let's see how that works out. See if we get anything on the other side of the limiter we like better. Once again, D Mechanic, the song D Mechanic, Jorge and Joaquin and Arturo is the song. Now here's the drum track. All my drums are feeding into this aux. It's kind of cluttered because I'm setting it up to show you several different things. And I'll explain these two scenarios in a minute. Now, I'm dumping all of this into Ozone 5. Ozone 5 is really not a factor here, and we're going to do with it without so you can see what's going on. So my limiter, of course, that I love is the L2007 by Massey. Let's check it out without it. With it. Okay, now I'm going to take this off for now just so that we can get a feel for what we're doing. Now here's with. This is a very inexpensive, really good quality transient enhancer. It's called Bittersweet 2 by Flux, who makes some incredible products. So I'm gonna do one time through the bar without it, and then we'll listen a couple times with it. Pretty dramatic. I recommend you listen to this on pretty good quality earbuds or headphones or speakers. On my NS10s, it's very dramatic. Even on my R-tones in my laptop, it's actually dramatic. I'm cranking it way too much. I would normally run it about right here. Okay. Now, what about if you're doing maybe a rock song and you want to try it with a compressor? Works just as good, doesn't it? Now, I'm running a really slow attack time. Now, if I increase the attack time, it's going to have the effect of shortening the transients, which is predictable. The longer attack time sometimes makes it sound better. Let's see what happens in this example when we go to a quick attack time. Okay, so another technique is to use a slower attack time. Now that causes other issues to come into play that you might have to compensate for with your release time. Now I'm going to give you one other example of a commonly used plug-in for transient enhancement. Here's the Trans-X wide. This is a setting I use a lot. Go ahead and pinch this guy. This is a setting I use a lot for my, of course you're going to have to change the threshold and the makeup gain. But this is kind of a starting place I like on the waves and on the UAD SSL compressor. So here we go, compression but no limiting and no transient enhancement. With the compressor, I think this is a little bit sweeter than the bittersweet. Let's try the bittersweet in the same spot. See if I'm right. Ooh, I don't know, bittersweet sounds good. It's just up to you. So there you go. Experiment before you get to the compressor, and you might try Transient Designer. You might try slight compression before the limiter. You can try, sometimes I'll try L2 before my Ozone 5. You can actually see where it didn't work on this song, but you know, I told you I'd let you hear kind of a finished chain. Let me do that for you real quick. So I've got the Ozone set with slower attack times on the compression part, so that what transients I've added before everything gets there to the stereo bus make it through. Here's where I put my plugins. You know, real quick, a lot of you guys ask me, why do I have 3 things? Well, I like to record on this guy. Now this master allows me to have control over the input level going to this track. It gives me it reduces my potential to distort and to get crazy negative things happening when I get a dB or two too loud. And then if I were to put plugins here, when I brought this down, like the compression would change because it's actually controlling the input to the compressor. This way, I set this first, and then my compression doesn't change when I lower the level. Now, if I lower the level of this guy, then this is obviously going to change, but I'm -6, just to give me a little bit of headroom. You can tell I'm not really nuking anything too much. This little bit of distortion here is only about a half a dB, and actually kind of adds to the sound a little bit. So there you go.
Hey guys, wanted to give you an opportunity to witness something that we're going to try to bring more to you this year. We're going to do a bunch more location shooting and try to get into some places that maybe you haven't had a chance to see, we haven't had a chance to see. And it's part of the gift that you've given to us that we want to give back. This segment that's about to come is one of the first ones. We got invited by a pioneering female engineer who just is gracious and smart and wonderful, has been impactful to women and impactful to men, worked with a lot of great artists, and heads up the recording department for Skywalker Ranch, George Lucas's incredible facility that has touched us in so many ways. Dave and Will went up and did an interview with Leslie Ann Jones. We are proud to have been invited. Proud to show this to you. So here's our interview with Leslie Ann Jones, pioneer from Skywalker Ranch.
What's up, everybody? We're here at Skywalker Ranch, and I'm with Leslie Ann Jones, one of my favorites, and soon to be one of your favorites too. Leslie, welcome. Thank you so much for having us. I feel like I'm a guest in your home.
Well, I'm really glad you guys decided to make the trip up.
Gosh, you know, when you get this opportunity, talking to you in this space and the history the space has, and gosh, so many inventions started here. So many things in the movie and film and sound industry. It's like. If it had an SSL, it'd be heaven, you know what I'm saying? I don't see any real, I do see a reel-to-reel. I see an old Ampex over there. I can tell that without my glasses.
We've got a couple of Studer 827s that, in fact, I'm going to use them tomorrow on a project, so.
Oh, cool.
Still do analog.
A lot of people think that what you and I do for a living is technical, but it's really musical and creative. Can you tell us a little bit about your dad, who was I'm a big fan of his. He was someone that I discovered. This question is never going to end, is it? He was someone I discovered at a young age and very influential on me.
Yeah.
Take me back to that.
That's nice to hear. Well,
Spike Jones.
Yeah, for the viewers that don't know, my father was Spike Jones, a musical satirist who was probably most popular in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s for taking songs that were standards of the day and making satires of them.
But still, he played them and performed them better than the originals.
He did. He was also a very, a first call drummer for radio bands in his day, and continued to play percussion. And everyone in his band had to be great musicians, because in order to do the things that he wanted them to do, all the pratfalls and the gags and stuff like that, and play an instrument at the same time, you really had to be great.
So in this incredible musical environment, what drove you to guitar as opposed to vocals like your mom and actually you're a lead singer in some of your bands too, so you got your mom in, but why didn't you choose drums? Why did you choose guitar?
I don't know. I just, guitar, I was given a guitar when I was a teenager, and I don't know what drew me to it, but it just seemed to be something that I wanted to play. And I was given a Sears Silvertone guitar and a small amplifier, and I started playing.
Wow.
And the first group I was in was with my cousins, and it was a folk group. So several of us played guitar. We all sang, and I sang background mostly.
And how did those experiences influence and take you into your recording career?
Well, I think some of the influences in that period with my father's playing and my mother's singing, I don't think I realized until later how they affected me.
Did they take you to the studio with them?
I was with my father in a lot of TV studios because he had a summer replacement TV show. So I spent a lot of time with him in TV studios. When I was in my first group, we did a lot of recording. So I spent a lot of time in studios then, but it never even occurred to me that I would be...
Was this in New York or LA?
It was in LA, you know.
Okay.
We just got a lot of connections to people and kind of fell in with this crowd and kept recording, but nothing ever came out. But I had a lot of experience recording. And I kept playing, and then eventually just started mixing live sound for groups, and decided that, I was always self-taught. And never could be the kind of guitar player that I really admired. And when you grow up with the best musicians, at some point you just realize, I can't get there from here. But when I put my hand on a couple of faders and I could change the balance of background vocals, that to me, I could do. I could hear the balance I wanted.
I love hearing you say that.
And I could change that, And then I thought, well, fine. So that's what I work towards.
How can we describe that feeling to the engineers in our audience? Because it is a very necessary feeling to have to reach the level of success you've reached. How can you describe that feeling, and can it be gotten? Pardon my grammar.
I just remember, I mean, I mean, you and I have discussed this. We will never still master what we do, because
Right.
the minute you do, you stop learning and growing. And in the business that we do, there's always something new. You know, every day is different. Every artist is different that comes in. Every snare drum is different, you know. There's always something you need to know. And when I was starting out, I would think, geez, when am I ever going to, learn this? And then all of a sudden you record something and you've got all the faders and they're all even and it sounds halfway okay. And well, maybe I kind of know something about what I'm doing. Part of it, I think, too, is going out and hearing music, having an idea of what music is supposed to sound
Bruce
like.
Swedien taught us that.
Yeah.
Taught me that, I should say.
You know, when I was a teenager, or my late teens, I spent a lot of time listening to big bands live. And so by the time I started recording live instruments and bands and horns, I had a kind of an idea of what it was supposed to sound like, you know.
When did you get your first 4-track tape recorder? I remember that sounded like a seminal moment in your life.
It was about the same time when I had my PA company. And I was working with 2 other guys. We sort of combined a bunch of sound equipment. And then we decided that when the Tascam 4-track and console came out, that we'd put one in the basement of my house. And because the idea is we'd go out and maybe record people and then bring it back and have a home studio. This was years and years ago.
Yeah.
And we actually didn't do a lot of work there because at some point one of the guys got a job in a studio, and then I was working for ABC Records at the time and in the public relations department, and eventually got a job in the studio there. But it gave me a way of really sort of learning kind of firsthand how things worked, how a console worked, how a tape machine worked, having to align it, overdubbing, all of those things.
And I think your first job was ABC Studios, and the gentleman that hired you seemed like a magnificent person, but he had a little bit of understandable reticence about taking in his first female employee. Did you have a confidence when you were there? Did you know you could do the job, or were you bluffing? I mean, it seems to me like you had already gone through the equivalent of 30 semesters of a traditional recording school, and you were ready to go, weren't you?
Well, you know, it's a really interesting question the way you put it, because I think that if you want to move ahead, there's a certain amount of, I think, bravado that you have to have. And I don't know if you want to call it bluffing or not, but you have to believe that you can do what it is that might come your way. And if you, even if that just means knowing who to ask how to do it.
Yeah, which we both did a lot of.
Yeah. So when I was starting out, I really thought I was going to be a producer and manager.
I think Peter Asher was your hero.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I didn't think I was going to be an engineer. And so when I asked Phil Kay for a job, I wasn't expecting that I was going to be a lifelong engineer. But I knew enough about it because I'd already done live sound, I had done home recording, I knew recording studios. So, you know, there's always something that you know enough about to be able to ask for a job, but I wasn't expecting that I would still be doing it this long.
I went the route of independent, but you seem to have a comfort factor being on staff at a place.
I
Can
do.
you explain the difference between those two approaches?
I was an independent for 3 years before I came up to the Automat, and here in San Francisco. And then I was an independent for a couple of years when the Automat closed, and then I went to Capitol. And then I came here. So really a small part of my career has been as an independent. And I enjoy the collaboration and the teamwork and the camaraderie of being in a studio situation. It just seems to suit me better than to be pounding the pavement. I'm probably the worst salesperson of my own work, and because my career has not been around top 10 records, which I think if you're an independent, if you have that kind of a career, that gets you a lot more work. For me, the kind of career I have is showing up every day, no matter who's in the studio, making records, and that's my life. So being on staff suits me really well.
Part of it is your taste is so Catholic. I mean, you go from
I'm a recovering Catholic. I have to.
in the sense of universal, but I can't imagine that you would be happy if you couldn't get your hands on a string quartet and record them, or if you couldn't do a 8 trillion piece orchestra like you would record on the other side of this glass.
Yeah.
Did it have anything to do with your taste? Because your jazz records are exemplary. I think did you win a Grammy in 2011 for a jazz record?
No, it's for a classical record. I got a Grammy for the soundtrack for Good Night and Good Luck, which was a jazz record with Diane Reeves.
Wow.
And then another one for Kronos Quartet.
So maybe that has something to do with, maybe your taste led you to where because how do you go sell yourself to an orchestra, you know?
Yeah.
Unless you attach yourself to a place where they tend to want to come record.
I think that's part of it as well. The music I most enjoy working on seems to be the music that gets done in the larger kind of studios that I work on. Whether at the Automat where it was R&B, because, you know, one time I was reminded the other day I was working with the Whispers, Confunction, and Maze all at the same time.
And brag a little bit. The Automat days that was a special place.
That was a very special place. Yeah.
Brag a little bit about some of the stuff you did there.
Well,
we just did.
Yeah.
You worked with Santana. Worked a lot there. Did you get to work with Carlos?
I did the first digital multi-track recording in San Francisco at the Automat. It was a jazz record that Carlos did with Herbie Hancock and Ron Carter on bass, Tony Williams on drums, and you know me getting to engineer it. So it was
Tony
very
Williams. I haven't thought of
exciting.
that name forever. What a great drummer!
He was a fantastic
and
drummer.
sidemen.
Yeah, it was great, and you know it was wonderful getting to work with Carlos. I had done plenty of work with Herbie already there.
We're approaching 100 episodes, and I've never worked with anyone yet, except for maybe Bruce Swedien, that I could ask this question. But what, as an engineer, how do you approach recording, say, Santana or a Maze or a jazz band? Take me through the similarities and the differences, SAT style, between that and, say, an orchestra, because it's two different skill sets, right?
It is. Well, but it all centers around trying to get the sound that's required for that setting. In a jazz setting, you're dealing with more intimate performance. You're dealing with perhaps more close miking, but still wanting to have some ambience and some air around things.
But there's more psychology involved with the jazz group than with obviously with the string group, right?
Well, for them maybe, not for me. I mean,
Explain that?
Not as an engineer. There's no more psychology involved in it for me. As long as I can position people so they can hear themselves and they're comfortable, which I have to do for everybody that I work with. That's number one. They have to be comfortable in order to be able to give me a performance that's worthy of being recorded. So, and that's true whether it's a jazz ensemble or a full orchestra. Everybody has to hear what they need to hear, and they have to feel comfortable doing it. So the psychology for me doesn't really come into to play. In many cases, a jazz group is going to be more improvisational, so there's a lot more unexpected about it in terms of dynamics, in terms of who's going to play, how loud they're going to play. Whereas in an orchestra setting, everything's written out. You know what the dynamics are. You know when I can look at a score and I can figure out when somebody's going to be louder or softer.
So on a live orchestra, are you writing the faders
I
in
am.
terms of input
I
to
am.
tape?
Yep. I still do that the same way I would do it with a jazz group, where if somebody's playing a solo, I would make them louder. If somebody's doing a solo in an
So
orchestra,
basically, you're doing live, a combination of your live experience in a recording environment.
Yeah, and you know, I've always done that because people expect when they come in the control room to hear the music the way they've just played it, and they don't want to know that you're going to take care of it later. They don't want to know that their solo is going to be louder later, because their performance is depending on what they hear. So I've had to learn how to, and you asked this earlier about, you know, having your hands on the faders and knowing what the balance is going to be. I've had to learn by experience what my sense is of what they want and what the arrangement is supposed to be and how it's supposed to sound, and do that in a balance so that they can come in and hear it.
Let's assume that you're not using tape as much as you used to. Removing that part of the process, having the digital world, are you still feeding an input to a compressor, or are you going straight to Pro Tools?
I go through a console first.
Well, what I mean is like the level coming out of what between the console and the tape.
Oh no! If I need to use a compressor, I'll record it that way.
You will?
Because it's part of my sound. I mean, and I don't mean my sound personally, but if I think that a sound needs a compressor or an EQ, or needs something else to make it sound the way it has to sound in order to complete this picture I have in my head, I will record that the way it is.
Of the many things we use a compressor for, we don't have to worry about banging a tape machine as hard.
Right.
Has that altered the way you work? Has it made it better or worse? Or?
Well, it's funny, when I go back to analog recording, it's so different now.
It's completely different.
And you know, not only the my mic choices are even a little different now going back to analog. Yeah, because you know, here in particular, we have such a sort of a pristine kind of hi-fi sound that you can really hear so many nuances in what you record, that when I go back to analog tape now, I tend to use fewer tube mics, for instance, because all the things that you would use to sort of warm up digital and make that sound like you used to have analog sound, in the context of what you're used, how our ears are trained now, it doesn't sound quite right on analog. So I tend to use things that are a little cleaner now on analog than I do in
interesting, huh?
Pro Tools. Yeah, and I didn't really think about that until this current project that I'm going to continue on tomorrow, and I realized that some of the choices I were making were different now than they used to be.
Wow. A lot of us will never get to mic an orchestra. How many pieces is a typical big orchestra, like a John Williams-sized orchestra? 60, 70?
Oh, actually more. Most of the video game scores we do can range anywhere from 65 to 90 pieces.
And take me through the micing process. How many ambient mics do you have, and how many close mics do you have?
We tend to do them like film scores, where you would have a left, center, and right on a tree, and then we'd have a couple of wides.
A left, center, and right on the same mic stand?
Yeah.
Any MS or?
No, those are Omni, and then a couple of wides for Omni, some surrounds in the back, and then section mics.
What's a surround? What does that mean?
Surround mics, so that if you were mixing in 5.1, or you were doing a film mix, you would have ambient mics for the back speakers. So we tend to record orchestras, whether it's for films or not, kind of the same way.
Before we get to the close mics, the way you describe the mics, every room you go to would be a different process, because you're relying so much on the sound of the room. If you don't have a pristine sounding room, like your room out here that we're about to look at, and say Capitol has a pristine room, do you have are you miking them from experience, or do you run in and listen to those ambient mics during tune-up, or because it seems like that's an experience thing more than a technical thing, right?
Well, yeah, I would say it's an experience thing, and I think most of the spot mics end up being used if you need to feature a particular section, or if the room might be lacking in something, or if a section didn't play as loud as they needed to. A lot of those things are taken care of in the dynamics of the orchestra. And so there are the producers of the session that are in here listening that realize that the woodwinds are supposed to be louder in a section, so they'll ask the conductor to make them play louder. Many of those things you don't have to reach for. So in a lot of cases, the spot mics are just extra coverage in case you need them. The goal is, of course, if you're in a great sounding room, that you can just have the room mics and put them up and you hear the whole orchestra.
And describe to me what the track count looks like in terms of like all those. Does that end up on like, let me guess, 4 stereo tracks or 5 stereo tracks?
So you can have you know, several things submixed, but it still ends up being about 24 channels. I mean, just the room mics, and I hang a mic just for the LFE, so just for the bass sound. So that's 8 mics, just for room mics.
Wow, I had no idea.
And that's 8 tracks.
Because when I get it, like most of the times when I get live strings, I get a stereo room pair, usually a stereo distant pair. Then I get help me with a plural of some of these things. When I get the violins, the celli, and God, I went southern on cellos, didn't I? And you know, I get a stereo pair of those, and then I tend to like, in the music I'm working on, I tend to like to push up the close mics and fill in with the room mics. But it's the opposite for you, right? You create the sound with the room mics, and then if you need to fill in anything individually with the...
Right, and I think you know, a lot of that too depends on what the use is going to be for. I have a friend of mine, John Kurlander, who's a wonderful mixer. He works here a lot. He ends up using a lot of. He uses wonderful room mics, but he uses a lot of 57s for his section mics because when he does things for video games, you need something that's going to cut through.
Right.
And so, whereas the kind of mixing you do, of course, you want more of the close mics because you're competing with, you know, synths and a million vocals and, you know, beats and all.
A million vocals is right these days.
All kinds of stuff. But for the stuff I'm doing, if it's an orchestra day, you're not really competing with anything else.
Okay.
So, you know, you tend to want that kind of grand sound.
Now, if you were doing a purely classical piece, how would that be different from what you just described for a video game? Any different?
I might use a few less spot mics because if it was a classical piece, the amount of pieces you would be doing wouldn't be so different. So you wouldn't have to have so much different coverage. You wouldn't have to protect your butt as much as you do for a video game score, where it's a lot of different cues. Sometimes it's very brass heavy. Sometimes it's a lot of different percussion instruments. Sometimes the producers and composer will come in with percussion that's already recorded that you have to play to.
If you took your main room mic and moved it 2 feet to the left, would it destroy your sound?
Yes, and I'll.
What about 6 inches?
It would, because you're trying to get a picture of the whole room.
So the mic placement is extremely critical.
The mic placement is extremely critical. If you want a picture of the whole orchestra, how they're sitting, where they're sitting, moving mics even a little can affect that. Sometimes you want to do that because you're not getting what you need.
Well, as an engineer, it seems like phase is going to become logarithmically impossible to control. I mean, how do you deal with phase with all those mics?
Fortunately, you have everybody playing together at the same time, so that you're really capturing everything at the same time. And it's not that much of an issue, but it also depends on the room that you're in. If you're in a room like this or any great sounding room, you'll hear a big difference even if you move a microphone an inch versus or having someone. I know a lot of times when I'm working with Kronos Quartet, if we're having trouble hearing one of the guys, we'll just say, you know, why don't you just move up on your chair a little? and just play that much closer to a microphone, and it makes all the difference in the world. Or if I'm doing a solo piano project and I'm not hearing enough low end on the piano, instead of moving the microphone, we'll take the low end of the piano and just move it a little closer.
In terms of the sound stage, let's take a minute and run out there. Do you mind?
No.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, guys, as promised, we're now in the scoring stage. I wish there was some way we could convey the magnificence of this room. You just have no idea. Have you guys ever tried, like you're talking and you go from one room to another and you hear the sound change and you go, that's kind of cool. Well, this is more dramatic than anything you've ever experienced in your life. It's incredible, Leslie. I mean, and you're telling me this is all changeable, adaptable by moving panels and, wow. I'd give anything to be able to record something in here.
I would not be surprised if just the sound of our voices on the lavaliers are different in this room than they were in the control room, and that people can actually hear the ambience of the room around them, even though the room is almost completely dead. It is a very natural sounding room that can be changed completely from very live to very dead or anywhere in between, which is how we can accommodate all the different kinds of music that we can record here. Most traditional scoring stages are just very live rooms, and you can make them a little deader by putting carpets down or putting baffles up, but they are essentially live rooms. Most recording studios are traditionally fairly dead, but we have the ability of doing both things here because we can make it very live or very dead.
How high is the ceiling, do you know?
30 feet.
And
60 by 80
holy
is the
cow.
room. So it's a large space, but even when we're doing tracking dates, we have the ability to make it seem like a very intimate space by the way we arrange people. So even though it's a long way back to the control room, no one ever feels like they're in just this giant room, you know.
I don't know if you guys can see behind me all these little pieces of tape. Those represent sessions that are still in progress, and you had to tape where the violi were, where everybody was, and then you got to replicate the sound exactly.
Yeah. Some of them actually are even for the same project. I was doing a solo piano project with a local artist named Tim Johnson, and we had diffusers around him, and he wanted a bit of a different sound. So before we moved the diffusers, we had to mark them, because if it wasn't any better, we needed to move them back to exactly the same spot. So you'll see a couple of different marks where we've moved them and then have marked them again. You know, that's the kind of preciseness we have to deal with here, because it's such a wonderful sounding room that you can hear any difference.
When you have 60 people, do you have 60 sets of headphones, or are they? And does each person have do you have the headphone mix divided up into sections, or does everybody get the same mix?
No, we divide the orchestra into sections. We have one of our assistant engineers who's responsible for just mixing headphones, because he or she has to, because our main headphone mixer is Judy Kirshner, who's a wonderful engineer in her own right. And so she has to mix the orchestra, she has to mix click. Sometimes when we have the violins split, for instance, a traditional orchestra setup would be first violins and second violins next to each other. On many of the scores I do, the violins are actually split. Well, they're used to hearing each other next to each other.
Oh, okay, and then they split for stereo reasons, right?
We split for stereo reasons, and because the composer might write syncopated rhythms between the two.
Cool.
Well, they need to hear each other a little. So her job is to try and figure out who needs to hear what in their headphones. And sometimes if somebody's a little out of rhythm, I might let her know, give them a little more percussion, or give them a little more click in bars 48 through 50. And she's got a video screen, she can see the bar count going by. And so yeah, everybody's got their own section. And yeah, we can actually do up to 20 headphone mixes, although I don't think we've ever used that many.
Wow. There's a thing, guys, in recording is RT times. There's several elements that that we quantify and describe the way sound reacts in a space. The most clearly obvious one is somebody clapping their hands in a room and listening to the decay time. Does it decay going sharp? Does it decay going down in pitch or up in pitch, or is it smooth decay? All those kinds of things. And the way the room has these panels that can be slid in and out, Leslie can control all those things and more by doing that. Can you describe the difference in sound that occurs when you make these movements on these panels and how you would use that in a musical way?
Well, the spec for the room is from 1/2 second to 3.5 seconds, give or take. So when the room's completely open, it's 3.5 seconds. Of course, that's with nobody in here. If you put a full orchestra in, it probably gets down to about 2 seconds.
That much?
Oh yeah, so by the time you fill the room with bodies, it's going to affect the reverb time.
When you slide them out, the room gets less ambient?
Exactly, yes, because it's concrete, and then when you slide the panels out, that gets absorbed.
Okay.
So when you want to make the room deader, the more panels you slide out, the more dead the room is. And we even have panels on the ceiling that are operated by motors.
I can see that.
I was able to make the orchestra sound smaller, even though the players didn't change, by changing the sound of the room.
Someone that didn't have the sophistication of hearing you have, they could hear that drastic a change easily, I bet, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And the other types of audio profession that are available in the film world here are what?
Well, on the scoring stage, on the music side, of course, we have several assistant engineers. We have somebody we bring in who does our Pro Tools editing, although everybody knows how to operate Pro Tools and does a very good job of it. But when we're doing a film score, we have 5 people on a film score. There's myself, Dan Thompson, who's our assistant, Robert Gatley, Judy Kirshner's doing headphones, and Andre Zwiers is doing Pro Tools. So that's 5 people on a date. On the film side, you've got tape librarians, our sound library for all of our sound effects.
Luke,
you know,
I'm your father, all that stuff?
Yeah, cataloging all the sound effects, so that the editors can find the sounds when they want them. Video transfer, audio transfer, apprentice editors, sound effects editors, supervisors, which of course you have to, have had a certain amount of experience. What we call re-recording mixers, which is the equivalent of a mixer. So those are the people that sit at the film dubbing console and take the dialogue, effects, and music and marry them all together to make the final soundtrack. Mix tech, which is the film's equivalent of our assistant engineer, but it is not really an assistant engineer on the film side. And in fact, mix tech is something that was coined here. That and sound designer are 2 of the terms that were developed here at Skywalker to try and explain the jobs that those people did.
Now, my dear friend and friend of the show, Alan Meyerson, what would he be called?
I think Alan would be called a scoring mixer. He does primarily score recording and mixing, and he might be on a final dub as a music mixer, but I think Alan would consider himself a scoring mixer first and foremost.
Leslie, one of the things I admire about you is your passion, and your passion is not just in music, but in other areas of helping your fellow, I get stuck here, womankind, let's say. How did that passion start? What led you to become and be known for all your great work in that area of trying to help women get into this great profession that we're in?
Well, it's funny. I guess I don't think of it that way because I don't think of being known for that. But I think
you are, by the way. You're known for that.
Well, thank you.
As a subset, not only that.
It's I think in all the years I've been doing this work, there is still a lack of women in our industry.
Clearly.
And so I have taken as many opportunities as I can to give workshops, to speak on panels. not necessarily about women in the industry. I'm just as interested as being on a panel with you and a bunch of other guys, because that, to me, says to women and men in the audience that we really aren't any different, and that you can do this just the same as anyone else can. So I've done plenty of things that are the why aren't there more women doing this, as many as I have, talking about snare drum sounds. To me, it's one and the same. I think that women that are just starting out need to feel that they can, that they have something to not necessarily look up to, but they can say, oh, I can do that. There's somebody else doing that. There's, Sylvia Massey's, producing, rock bands, and
Sylvia's
there's,
so talented.
Judy Sherman's winning Grammys for producing, string quartets, and I want people to have whatever opportunities are available to them, and however I can participate in that, I've been happy to do. I would say being at Skywalker has helped that immensely, because as a company, we are, believe, I think, that there should be more women doing what we're doing. We have many women that work here as re-recording mixers, sound effects editors, sound supervisors on the film side, but yet a lot of the applications that we get, for instance, most are not from women. So there's still this dividing line that between the few women that are in engineering schools and the women that are actually making the leap and trying to get a job. And that's what I'm trying to address right now.
How can we solve that problem? Is it a function with more scholarships? Like should we encourage the Leslie Ann Scholarship for Full Sail, or how do we? It's a solvable problem. Where do we start? And how can Pensado's place help?
Yeah, I don't. That's always been a very tough question to answer, because it has to do with still so many social things that go on. Girls in grammar school that raise their hands first, and then they get to middle school, and all of a sudden the guys don't like the fact that they're raising their hands first and think less of them, and then high school with peer pressure, and where you don't want to appear too smart because you're considered brainy. I mean, there's all kinds of impediments to women becoming proficient in our profession, not the least of which is the hours. People would ask me when I would do panels or workshops, well, what if you had one recommendation to the women in the audience, what would you say? And I would say, don't make plans on Friday night. I mean,
or any night.
Or any night. And I had to learn balance in my life as a part of my life. If I wanted to make plans, I had to figure out how to work my life around that.
So you think that's an impediment?
I think there is a big impediment in that. And I think if you are one of two women in a class of 30, already that's an impediment, because you're going to think, wow, I'm already a little apprehensive about raising my hand or about asking questions, because I'm only one of two here and all the rest of the room is guys, and what are my chances going to be of getting a job? But I think that you have to be passionate about what it is you want and figure out how to get there, no matter what it takes, which is how I did it.
I got you. You and I are engineers. We solve problems. We don't.
Yeah.
We see a problem, we try to solve it. I'm solution oriented, and so it's just driving me nuts. I can't figure this out.
Well, I think there are plenty of opportunities out there. I know when I go to Banff, I've done many workshops at Banff where I'll
Explain
go.
what that is for our audience.
Well, the Banff Center is just a wonderful institution in Banff, Canada, which is in Alberta, and it's a a place where people go and do residencies in dance and music, and they have sessions where they take engineer students that are graduate students from all over the world, really, and get them to come in. And they have several sessions during the year. Teresa Leonard runs the program, does a great job. And every time I go there, I'm impressed with how many women that there are in that class. And I don't know if it's because Teresa tries that, or if, and many of the women don't even come from the United States. Some come from South America, some come from Europe. So the point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of opportunities in the world to learn other things that are not necessarily in the U.S. And a lot of people get out of recording schools and just think, well, all that's available to me is a job in a recording studio. Well, there's plenty of other opportunities to learn more and be exposed to things if you just, kind of pay attention to what's out there.
Do you have any favorite organizations that we should all be aware of in terms of that are actually thinking about this sort of thing? Does NARAS, I know you were, I can't remember your title. You're very high up at NARAS.
Well, I was chairman of the board of trustees of the Recording Academy.
Do they have any initiatives?
We have had women's initiatives, and we are a chapter-driven organization. So a lot of what happens in the chapters is a real emphasis on diversity. Not only gender diversity, but genre diversity as well, to make sure that the people that sit on the local chapter boards kind of represent everything. So there has been a diversity initiative at the Recording Academy to get more women and minorities to serve on local boards and as trustees. There are, even here on the Bay Area, there's Women's Audio Mission, which is, has been very vocal and at trying to get women more involved in technical things, engineering. They have a studio. They do classes. So there are a lot of organizations like that. Not that many. And I think there are many benefits to organizations like that.
I'm wondering if sociologically, if the lack of two-parent families has any influence. In other words, traditionally the father, who would from that generation be more technical, isn't around to expose the family to technical things as much as a poor mom who has to just get the rent paid.
I think that that's very true. I think
that's
some of
probably
the
a small part of it.
But I think some of the electives that aren't available in school, But what I was going to say about being a chef for many years, women were associated with home cooking. They weren't associated with running a restaurant. They weren't associated with being in charge. That to me is no different than why you can have women assistant engineers. And this is something that I noticed. What is the difference between what happens to somebody being a great assistant engineer to making that leap to being the mixer? Well, what's the difference between being a home cook and being in charge of a restaurant? And the how outsiders see you when we're great note takers. You can read our handwriting. We know how to run sessions. We get orders right. We keep track of things. All those things women are very good at. And how do you translate that to letting them sit in the big chair and run a session? How do you take somebody that knows how to cook for their 6 kids and go let them run a restaurant? It's not so different. It's making that leap between what the expectation is about us, that we do all these great things as an assistant engineer, and yet we should be able to sit in the big chair and run a date and know how to do it, I remember the days when people I was at the Automat, and I'd be working with a new client. They'd come around the corner, poke their head in and say, when's our engineer getting here? And I'd have to say, well, I am your engineer. And they would go, oh, okay. And it was like, you know. Then it would take about an hour, and finally, when I got the sounds up, everything was fine, you know. But it just takes time.
Leslie, thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Dave.
You've been inspirational. This facility is inspirational. If Mr. Lucas happens to watch the show, congratulations on just a spectacular place. And with your spirit and vibe, it's a little cold without you, but with you, it just comes alive. It sparkles. And thank you so much for taking time to share some of your thoughts about other women doing what you do, and showing us around the film stage, and inspiring us that there might be other ways to earn a living in audio besides just mixing, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And my dear partner Herb always says at this point in the show, "Would you come back? Would you come back?"
Well, and
so will you
I have
come
to say,
once?
will you come back?
Of
you
course,
know?
of course.
Great.
As you guys can see, we were treated so special. We had total access. It was inspirational. And I want to give a shout out to Leslie and the crew and everyone there. George Lucas, didn't get to meet him, but maybe next time when we go back and film one of our Pensadians there at the helm. Leslie is an inspirational lady on so many levels. And I got to tell you guys, it was just being in the room with her made me a better engineer. And I hope that some of that rubbed off in terms of your experiences from what you saw today. Okay, getting a little serious there. That's not Pensadian, so we'll see you next week.